The tunnel at 3. There are places you pass so often they become invisible, until one night they insist on being seen. Elias Mercer had taken that underpass for years, a sliver of convenience between his apartment and the bus stop. Then, for reasons he couldn't name, he began arriving precisely at 3 in the morning. The hour felt less like time than a small, punctured silence, one that held a light at the far end, pale and steady, as if someone had left a small lantern on purpose. The first few nights, he told himself it was curiosity, the sort of trivial, harmless thing that softens a heavy day. He paused beneath the rusted sign that still named a tram line no longer running, checked his phone to stave off embarrassment, and stepped in. The bricks smelled faintly of coal and spilled tea. Up close, the light was no brighter, only patient, and the air inside the tunnel seemed to answer in a different pitch, as though the space had learned to hold its own breath when someone entered. On the third night, he found the pocket watch. It lay on a low ledge, a small, familiar warmth against cold stone, as if it had been set there by a hand that knew his. Elias had inherited that watch decades ago, more a family talisman than a timepiece. He'd carried it through bleak apartments and brighter margins alike. Now, its wobbly second hand was moving in uneven increments, and the crystal held a hairline crack that refracted the lamp's light into something like a pulse. That pulse synchronized with the distant rhythm of his own heart. Myra, his neighbor, noticed his late departures and the watch on his wrist and offered a practical, thinly amused warning. Places that hang on the hour keep their own calendars, she said, tending her balcony plants like a woman trimming away regrets. Elias laughed it off then, but her eyes lingered. That look, equal parts pity and calculation, was a small anchor. Still, he returned night after night, rationalizations accumulating like detritus. Schedules, insomnia, a study habit accidental and harmless. The tunnel changed in ways he couldn't chart with a casual glance. A poster he'd never seen before appeared opposite the map, an advertisement for a talk that had happened years ago, edges feathering like an old memory. Sometimes the mortar between bricks looked newer. Once, a scrawl in hurried pencil near the map read only 2 words: "Come back." He told himself that patterns shift in neglected public spaces. Brickwork is repaired. Flyers appear. People pass by. But the comeback did not feel public. It felt personal. He began leaving things there. Small test offerings, a burned match, a page torn from a notebook, a coin. Each time the object was nudged farther in, never returned, as if the tunnel absorbed the gesture and catalogued it. He told himself he was engaging in a quiet experiment, testing whether a place could be coaxed into revealing itself. The watch kept ticking in his coat, but the hours in that corridor folded differently. Time seemed to smudge at the edges where light met brick. On the 10th night, he found a note in his own handwriting. The sentence was simple: "Don't cross the light." His breath fogged in the cold. He could not account for when he had written it. The memory blanked as if rubbed soft. He checked his pockets. His phone logs nothing. Myra's face flickered through his mind. Had she written it, left in jest? He went home and lay in bed, listening to the apartment sigh around him, the pocket watch ticking louder than the building's pipes. a small, stubborn insistence that measured more than minutes. The rule against crossing the light hardened into superstition. He would stand at the edge, feeling as if a thin membrane separated him from something patient and curious. When he held the watch in his palm and wound it, the ticking changed pitch, more like a throat clearing than a mechanism. Once, caught by the hush, he set a hand on the brick and felt it answer, a barely there warmth that rippled under his fingertips, as if the tunnel were testing for life. He stepped back and laughed, a sound that surprised him with its rawness. Neighborhood rumors began to find him. A man who paced the underpass, a fellow who talked to bricks. No one accused, only tidied their greetings. Elias welcomed the small disapproval. It meant he remained part of a community with gravity, a place where gossip could tether a person. Yet the nights multiplied. Habits calcify into rites. One night, halfway through his watch hand's slurred ticks, he noticed pacing marks on the damp stones, 2 sets, one his own, another older, and too precise to be accidental. The other set stopped directly within the lamp's glow. He began to dream in tilings. The watch, the lamp, the tiny scrawl images folding into each other like overlapping negatives. In his dreams, he followed the other prints. The light did not blind him, but seemed to rearrange the space into concentric rooms, each smaller, each lined with the transit map's inked lines. When he woke, he felt both relieved and cheated. The boundary felt paper-thin. He would go back, of course. Humans become stubborn when faced with an uncatalogued absence. They mistook absence for possibility. One night, he stayed until the first pale shift toward dawn, until pigeons began to complain on ledges, and a delivery truck coughed in the distance. At 4:49 a.m., he counted beats, the watch stubbornly out of sync. A breathing formed behind the lamp that was not his own, a breath that did not stir dust, but moved the light, a small tide. Elias felt, with a clarity like cold water, that the tunnel attended to him differently now, not merely as a passerby, but as a correspondent waiting for answers he hadn't known he owed. The final night before everything rearranged itself, Elias took his coat off and set it on the ledge, an offering that felt both foolish and essential. He left the watch openly, face up, the cracked crystal catching the lamp's pulse. He wrote, with a hand steadier than his pulse, "I am listening," and folded the paper so it looked like a letter, not an ultimatum. He did not cross into the light. He waited. The tunnel answered in pressure, a slight change in the air that pushed against his chest, as if the place itself breathed back. When he returned the following night, the coat was folded differently, not by his hands. The watch lay face down, its ticking muffled. The note had been opened and smoothed, the letters smudged as if read in a hurry. Something had answered, but not with words he could claim. On the stone opposite the lamp, someone had left a circle of tiny scratches, precise as a child's careful counting, numbering neither days nor hours, but something else, a slow inventory. The scratches stopped where the light began, like footsteps that refused to enter illumination. He thought of leaving town. He thought of telling Myra everything, but the story would have made her pity too sharp, and pity cannot fix the architecture of a place that remembers you. In the end, he chose ritual again. Leave a small lamp every morning at sunrise on his windowsill, lights set in quiet sequences that mirrored the tunnel's pulses, a soft Morse of domestic defiance. It comforted him for a while. It was a small language that made sense only to him, and whatever patient geometry watched from below. The last scene is a hesitation. One evening, he noticed that the lamp at the tunnel's entrance had been changed. It now swung on a longer chain, lowering the light just enough that its circle touched his shoes when he stood in the doorway. The watch in his pocket stopped, then began again, its ticks a cadence he could not place. Myra knocked on his door later that night and asked, quietly, whether he was all right. He answered with a smile that was not one. He walked outside at 3, as always, and the light welcomed him like a memory learning a name. When the morning came, people found his coat folded on the ledge. The watch wound, but stopped at 3. No footprints led into the lamp. Myra kept watering her plants and told them the way people tell stories to protect themselves from emptiness, with gentleness and small lies. The city kept moving around the underpass. Buses rattled, and a child learned the word tunnel and thought it ordinary. Yet once, on a winter night when the moon was thin, someone swore they saw a pale lamp at 3, and the tunnel seemed to settle, like a chest easing back into breath.